In a world where the forgotten often fade into silence, there lived a dog named Maya, though no one had called her that in years. Her name was once whispered with affection, spoken with warmth by a little girl in a house on the edge of a small town. But time, as it often does, turned gentle moments into ghosts. The family moved. The girl cried. And Maya was left behind, a victim of circumstance, tied to a fading memory. At first, Maya waited. Days turned into weeks. Hunger clawed at her belly. Rain soaked her golden fur. She barked at passing cars, chased after footsteps that never stopped. But no one came back. Eventually, her collar snapped. She wandered beyond streets and fences, guided by instinct and desperation. She crossed creeks, dodged coyotes, scavenged trash bins behind diners where no one dared to approach her. Her eyes lost their sparkle. Her trust faded. She learned to sleep with one ear alert. Then came the forest. It wasn't a place most strays dared to enter. But Maya didn't fear the unknown anymore. The towering trees and tangled undergrowth didn't judge her. Here, she wasn't an abandoned pet. She was just another creature trying to survive. In the forest, ancient, quiet, and alive, seemed to welcome her. It didn't offer warmth or food, but it gave her space, a place where time slowed and the noise of the world couldn't reach her. For months, Maya roamed the woods. She grew leaner, stronger. Her once golden fur was now tinged with dirt and burrs, her paws toughened by miles of rocky trails. She learned the scent of danger, the call of birds warning of predators, the rustle of leaves that meant a snake was near. She knew where the rabbits ran and which hollows stayed dry when it rained. She carved the life from the wild. And then, one cool spring morning, something inside her shifted. A warmth returned to her body, not from the sun, but from life growing within. Maya was pregnant. She didn't panic. She didn't understand fully, but nature whispered instructions into her bones. She began searching, not for food, but for shelter. Some were safe. Some were hidden. Days passed. She sniffed out old fox burrows, crawled into fallen logs, even dug beneath the roots of trees. And finally, deep in a shaded glen, she found it, a hollow beneath an ancient oak, lined with moss and dry leaves, sheltered by a large rock. A sanctuary. There, under the hush of the trees and the songs of distant birds, Maya gave birth to 5 puppies. They were small, blind, helpless. But they squirmed with life. Tiny yelps echoed from the den. She cleaned them gently, one by one, her instincts taking over. The forest, once just a place to survive, was now her home. Her world had grown from 1 soul to 6. In those first days, Maya barely left their side. She curled her body around them, shielding them from the chill of night and the watchful eyes of hawks. She drank from a nearby stream, scavenged what little she could find, and always returned before they stirred. Each squeak, each twitch of a paw, filled her with a sense of purpose she hadn't known in years. She had no name anymore. No collar. No home in the human sense. But under the canopy of towering trees, she was a mother. A protector. A guardian of 5 fragile lives that depended on her strength. And in the quiet hours of the night, when the forest hummed its lullabies and her pups nestled close, Maya would stare up at the sky through a gap in the trees. The stars didn't seem so distant here. She'd close her eyes and let the breeze carry her old memories away, the little girl, the backyard, the loneliness. What mattered now was the present. The sound of tiny heartbeats. The rise and fall of soft breathing. The promise of a future. Maya had been forgotten by the world. But the forest remembered. And here, with her puppies tucked safely at her side, she was no longer alone. As days turned to weeks, Maya's life settled into a rhythm, one that pulsed with the quiet heart of the forest itself. She was no longer just a survivor. She had become something more profound, a mother woven into the fabric of nature. The mornings were her favorite. Long before the sun's golden fingers touched the treetops, Maya would awaken to the tiny squeaks and snuffles of her pups shifting beside her. The forest was hushed then, like it was holding its breath, waiting for her to rise. She would stretch slowly, careful not to wake them, and nudge each one gently, counting, always counting. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Safe. Still breathing. Still hers. She'd step outside the den and sniff the air. It spoke to her, through the sense of dew-soaked bark, turned soil, wildflowers, and distant life. Her ears would flick, catching the calls of robins, the hoot of an early owl, the scurry of chipmunks. This forest wasn't just trees and silence anymore. It was alive. It was her village. Her days were simple but demanding. She scouted for food, roots, berries, the occasional rabbit if she was lucky. She'd drink from the cold stream that curved around the mossy boulder, then hurry back. The pups were still too young to leave alone for long. Sometimes, she'd find feathers from hawks nearby, or the scent of a fox. Every warning sign etched itself into her instincts like fire into bark. She became fierce. She became wise. Each pup was different. The smallest, Orant with a white spot on his nose, was the most vocal, always climbing over his siblings, always the first to nuzzle her belly. One had ears that refused to stay up, always flopping in different directions, while another, the quiet one, stared up at her with eyes that already seemed to understand the world's weight. She named them silently in her heart, not in words, but in feelings. The brave one. The climber. The shadow. The dancer. And the spark. They were growing quickly. Their eyes had opened, revealing soft, milky blues that would later deepen into browns and ambers. They toddled around the den now, stumbling, squealing, biting each other's tails in harmless play. Their curiosity knew no bounds. One even tried to chase a beetle out of the den one morning, only to tumble headfirst into a patch of wet leaves. Maya watched them with an ache of pride. For creatures born of abandonment, they had inherited nothing but joy. The forest, too, seemed to embrace them. Butterflies landed gently on fallen logs near the den. Rabbits paused to sniff the air when Maya passed. A doe and her fawn even grazed nearby once, unbothered by her presence. It was as if the wild had adopted her and her family, understanding their struggle. Nature respected those who fought to survive. Still, Maya knew peace could never last forever. She had felt it before, the calm before change. It lingered now, like a low hum beneath the beauty. The air, though sweet, carried a dryness she hadn't noticed before. The wind had changed. Less crisp. More hollow. But she pushed the thoughts away. Not today. Not while her pups wrestled with twigs and bark. Not while the sun filtered through the canopy, painting golden patches on their fur. She needed these moments, the stillness, the laughter, the illusion that nothing would ever touch them. Sometimes, when the pups were asleep and the forest fell into its afternoon slumber, Maya would lie just outside the den and watch the clouds move. She didn't dream like she used to. Not of streets or leashes or homes with fences. But sometimes, she imagined a clearing, far away, where they could run freely, together. Where danger wouldn't follow. Where food was easy, and safety wasn't something you had to fight for every hour. She would stay awake long after the sun had gone, keeping vigil as the moon climbed through the branches. Coyotes howled in the distance, owls hooted their lonely songs, and the stars blinked gently above her. The forest sang to her in rustles and whispers. She listened, learned, and answered in silent prayers to the sky. Let them live. Let them grow. Because that's all Maya wanted now, not a second chance for herself, but a first chance for them. It began as a whisper, so subtle it could have been missed. A shift in the wind. A sharpness in the air. Maya's ears twitched as she lay in the den, pups nestled against her belly, their tiny bodies rising and falling with each breath. She stood slowly, careful not to wake them, and crept outside, paws silent on the damp earth. That's when she smelled it. Smoke. Not the kind from a cozy cabin chimney. Not the gentle wood smoke that drifts from distant campsites. This was sharp. Acrid. Foreign. Wrong. It wrapped itself around the trees like a predator, slinking between branches, curling around the underbrush, whispering its intent in the language of danger. Maya's instincts screamed. Her head lifted, eyes scanning the treetops. Birds were fleeing, small flocks flapping and squawking, slicing through the sky in jagged lines. Squirrels chattered with panic as they darted from trunk to trunk. Even the insects seemed to vanish into the earth. Nature was reacting, not with confusion, but certainty. They all knew. Something was coming. She trotted forward, staying low, following the scent trail. The smoke grew thicker with each step. She climbed a rocky ledge just beyond her dense clearing and turned her gaze eastward. That's when she saw it. A dark plume rising in the distance, far but not far enough. It reached into the sky like a twisted hand, clawing at the blue, billowing with menace. The sun was slowly being swallowed by gray. Trees far away were silhouetted in orange flickers, barely visible, but undeniably burning. Fire. Maya had never seen one this size before, but her bones remembered. Somewhere deep in her DNA, stories of flame had been passed down, ancient memories from wolves and wild dogs who ran from heat that devoured forests. Fire was the one predator you could now fight. It came without mercy. It chased without pause. It consumed everything. She turned and sprinted back to the den. Inside, the pups were beginning to stir, whining softly in the dark. The air now carried the smoke even here, thin tendrils that made her throat scratch and her nose sting. She nudged each pup awake with urgency, licking their heads, urging them to move. But they were still so small. Barely walking. Clumsy. Unaware. Maya paced the den in circles. Her mind, once sharp with instinct, now spiraled with dread. How would she move them? Where would she go? What if the fire changed direction? What if it was already surrounding them? She had no map. No plan. Only the pulse of panic and the certainty that she couldn't stay. Outside, the wind shifted again, hotter now. Angry. Leaves rustled with a sound that wasn't playful anymore. A low rumble rolled in from the east, not thunder, but the growl of the blaze growing closer. Maya made a decision. One by one, she gently picked up her pups. She couldn't carry them all at once, her jaw could only hold so much. She'd have to make trips, back and forth, to a place beyond the ridge where the trees grew thinner and the river cut through the land like a silver ribbon. If she could make it there, maybe, just maybe, they could outrun the flames. The first pup she carried was the brave one. He nuzzled into her fur, unaware of the danger, trusting completely. She ran, not at full speed, but quickly, navigating roots and rocks, her breath heavy, her eyes wild. She reached the riverbank in minutes, gently placed him beneath a rock ledge, and turned around without hesitation. The second trip. Then the third. By the fourth, her legs ached. Smoke stung her eyes. The forest no longer sang its peaceful songs, it hissed and snapped, branches creaking as heat crept closer. With each return, the den grew darker. The light outside was no longer gold, it was amber, ominous. Shadows danced like specters on the trees. Maya didn't stop. Her body, once starved and weary, was now a machine of love and determination. Finally, she carried the last pup, the Spark. He squirmed the whole way, full of life. She ran harder this time. The wind was hotter. The air heavier. Embers danced like fireflies ahead of the inferno. Trees far in the distance cracked and groaned. It sounded like giants falling. She reached the riverbank and laid him gently beside the others. All five were safe, for now. Maya collapsed beside them, chest heaving, her fur singed along the edges. She lit their faces, counted them again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. But it wasn't over. The fire hadn't reached them yet, but it would. The wind howled through the trees like a warning bell, and Maya stood at the riverbank, heart pounding in rhythm with the distant crackle of approaching fire. She had done it, she had moved all 5 pups to safety. Or so she hoped. But this wasn't the end. It was only the beginning of the real fight. The fire was no longer just smoke on the horizon. It was roaring now, hungry and chaotic, devouring everything in its path. Ash rained down like a cursed snow. The forest, the one that had cradled her pups, that had hidden them and fed them, was turning into a nightmare of flames and falling embers. Maya turned her head, eyes scanning the thickening air, calculating. The river could serve as a temporary barrier, but not forever. If the flames jumped across, they'd be trapped. She needed to move them again, further, faster, towards somewhere untouched by the fire. But where? She looked at her puppies. Huddled close under the stone ledge, their tiny bodies trembled, not from cold, but confusion. Their eyes had just opened to the world, and already it was changing into something terrifying. Maya stepped forward and let out a low bark, not aggressive, but commanding. It was time to move. She nudged them gently, and like little shadows, they began to follow her down the edge of the riverbank. She led them north, downstream, where the river curved through tall ferns and old, towering pines. The ground here was damp, the soil darker. Perhaps the fire would hesitate before crossing such terrain. Maya could only hope. She didn't look back. She couldn't. Behind her, the inferno was growing louder, the sky darker, as if dusk had arrived early. The pups stumbled behind her, occasionally squeaking or whining. One tripped over a root. Another sat down in exhaustion. Maya circled back again and again, nudging, licking, encouraging. She couldn't carry them anymore. She was too tired, her legs shaking from the first rescue. But she would walk beside them for as long as it took. Each step felt like a lifetime. The heat pressed in from behind like a predator breathing down her neck. Birds shrieked overhead. Deer burst from the woods and sprinted past them in silent panic. Even the insects had stopped their endless chirping. The forest was in retreat, and Maya was marching against time. The river, ever faithful, glistened beside them. Maya steered the pups close to the water's edge, where the temperature was cooler and the foliage thicker. She knew this land. She had explored it in calmer days. There was a thicket up ahead, a dense grove surrounded by stone. She remembered resting there once, hidden from the rain. It might be their only chance. The pups were slowing, their little legs not built for escape. Maya paused under a large tree and let them rest. She stood watch, her tongue lolling from the heat, her body aching. Every instinct told her to collapse beside them. But she wouldn't. Not yet. From her perch, she could see the smoke rising higher now, curling like dragon's breath through the treetops. The flames were close enough that the air shimmered with heat waves. Still, she waited. The pups needed strength for one last push. Minutes later, she growled low in her throat. Time to move. They stumbled to their paws, following her once again, trusting without hesitation. It filled her with both hope and pain, because she knew trust was a dangerous thing in a world like this. Finally, she spotted the grove. Nestled between boulders and surrounded by tall grass, it was cooler here, sheltered, protected by natural stone and thick vegetation. The fire might skip this place, or at least take longer to reach it. She ushered them inside, one by one, and collapsed beside them. The pups curled against her, too exhausted to explore. Maya rested her head on a rock and stared out through the ferns. The light had changed. It wasn't quite night, but it wasn't day either. The smoke turned everything a shade of burnt gold. It was beautiful and terrifying all at once. She closed her eyes, but only for a second. Sleep was a luxury. She needed to listen, to smell, to be ready, because the fire hadn't stopped. It was still coming, and she didn't know if this place would be enough. But they were still alive. That mattered. That was victory. For now. The grove was still, for now. Sheltered by stone, wrapped in ferns and the tall embrace of pine trunks, it was as close to safety as the forest could offer. Maya had found this place once long ago, when she was still searching for a den. Back then, it had been a quiet refuge. Now, it felt like the last breath before a storm. The pups lay nestled against her, their fur sticky with sweat, ash clinging to their tiny muscles. They were quiet now, not from peace, but from exhaustion. Their bodies, still so new to this world, had already been pushed past what nature ever intended for creatures so small. Maya kept her ears alert. Her eyes darted constantly. Every crackle in the trees made her heart jump. The fire hadn't reached the grove yet, but its presence was everywhere. The smoke was thicker now, curling into the grove like a serpent searching for prey. The wind was unpredictable, sometimes still, sometimes rushing like a wave, carrying the heat of nearby flames. She couldn't sleep. She wouldn't. Instead, she did what she always did, watched and waited. She studied the sky, now a dim swirl of burnt gray and smoldering orange. Somewhere above, the sun was still shining, but it could no longer pierce the ash. And still, the forest around her sang no song. No birds. No frogs. No rustle of squirrels. The silence was deafening. Then, there was a sound. A branch cracking. A soft rustle. Not fire. Not wind. Something alive. Maya rose to her feet instantly. Her fur bristled, eyes sharp. She placed herself between the sound and her pups, her stance low and defensive. From the edge of the grove, through the smoke haze, came movement. A shadow stepped into view, then another. Deer. Two of them, maybe three, emerging through the thick grass, eyes wide with terror, sides heaving from their own desperate flight. They paused when they saw Maya, muscles tensing as if ready to flee again. But something in her stance made them stop. Maya didn't move. She just watched. Slowly, cautiously, the deer turned and continued, threading their way past the grove, deeper into the unburned forest. Maya relaxed only slightly. If prey animals were passing through, the fire hadn't encircled them, yet. She returned to the pups and lay back down, keeping her ears turned toward every sound, every shift of the wind. Time passed strangely in crisis. Minutes stretched endlessly, but urgency never waned. The pups stirred in their sleep, whining softly, dreaming perhaps of warmth and milk and play, things Maya wasn't sure they'd know again soon. Her body ached. Her paws were cracked from the run. Her lungs burned from the smoke. But she had no room for weakness. Not while danger still loomed. She licked each pup gently, cleaning the ash from their fur. It was a ritual. A reassurance. She needed to feel them breathing, needed to feel them safe, even if it was only for a moment. Suddenly, a shift in light caught her attention. The orange glow on the trees had darkened, become more intense, flickering. Maya stood again, stepping to the edge of the grove. What she saw sent ice through her veins. The ridge they had descended earlier was now crowned with flame. Trees stood silhouetted like burning giants, their tops ablaze, raining embers down into the brush. The fire had crested. It was coming down now. Fast. She looked back at the pups, so small. So slow. There was no more time. Maya turned and barked, a sharp, urgent command. The pups, still groggy, blinked up at her. She barked again and nudged them to their feet. They didn't understand, but they trusted. She couldn't go back the way they came. The river path was likely cut off. The only direction left was deeper into the unknown forest, toward a canyon she had only seen once. It had steep walls and cool stone floors. If they could make it there, the fire might not follow. With every ounce of strength left in her bones, Maya led them out of the grove again. Because this grove, this shelter of stone, was no longer safe. And she refused to let her puppies burn. Smoke thickened around them like a living wall. Maya pressed forward, every step a war between instinct and exhaustion. The forest was no longer recognizable. It had turned into a maze of shadows and light, glowing orange from the fire behind and dark gray ahead. Tree trunks stood like sentinels, scorched and silent. The heat wasn't just behind them anymore, it was all around. The pups stumbled behind her, legs dragging. They coughed occasionally, tiny, ragged sounds that broke Maya's heart. Their small bodies weren't built for this, and neither was hers anymore. But survival didn't care about limits. Survival demanded movement. The fire had begun to race down the ridge. Behind them, the roar grew louder, like thunder cracking through the woods. Every few seconds, a tree would fall in the distance, crashing with a sound that echoed through the valley like a warning bell. Maya didn't flinch. She couldn't afford to. She had chosen to lead them toward the canyon, an area she had only visited once, long before the puppies were born. It was a risky move. The terrain was rocky and uncertain, and it could be difficult for the pups to navigate. But stone didn't burn. That was all that mattered now. Branches above them began to drip flaming leaves. Maya moved faster, carefully watching where the pups stepped. One of the smaller ones, her runt, the soft gray-furred one she had named Luna in her mind, was falling behind. Maya stopped abruptly, turned, and lifted Luna by the scruff of her neck. She couldn't carry all of them, but she could help this one. The others paused, panting, eyes wide and frightened. Maya barked softly, and they moved again, following her lead. This time she took a side path, away from the main trail that now smoldered and cracked. The undergrowth here was denser, but the air was slightly cooler. For now. Suddenly, they came upon a small stream. It wasn't wide, just a trickle cutting through the forest floor, but it was enough. Maya lowered Luna gently into the damp grass, and one by one, the puppies flopped down to drink. Maya dipped her snout into the water too, savoring the cool relief. Then she stood, scanning. She knew this area. The canyon was close, perhaps a mile or less. But between here and safety lay a ravine. It was narrow, deep, and unstable in parts. The last time she had crossed it, she'd been alone and strong. This time, she had 5 fragile lives behind her. Still, they had no choice. The wind shifted suddenly. A burst of hot air surged through the trees, and Maya turned just in time to see fire leaping across the canopy behind them. Embers shot forward like arrows. One landed on a dry bush just yards away. It caught instantly. They had seconds. Maya barked sharply, urgency in every note. The pups jumped to attention. No more rest. No more water. They had to move, now. She led them through the undergrowth, dodging fallen branches, weaving between rocks and roots. The sky above was nearly black now, filled with smoke and ash. And through it all, the fire roared, closer and closer, chasing them like a predator that wouldn't stop. They reached the edge of the ravine. It was deeper than she remembered. The sides were steep, but not vertical. A path ran down one side and up the other, narrow, rocky, and treacherous. Maya hesitated for only a second. She had to trust her instincts. She guided the pups down first, watching each one carefully. Their paws slipped on the gravel, but they followed her closely. She descended last, making sure none were left behind. When they reached the bottom, they were enclosed by high rock walls and damp shadows. The noise of the fire dimmed slightly, muffled by stone. It gave her a moment, just a moment, to breathe. But they weren't safe yet. Maya climbed the far wall slowly, carefully guiding the pups up the rocky incline. At one point, the smallest one, Luna, slipped and slid backward. Maya dropped instantly, caught her by the scruff, and nudged her forward again. Finally, they crested the edge. And then, silence. Not complete silence, but a strange, still hush. The fire hadn't yet reached this side. The air was clearer. The ground wasn't scorched. Trees stood tall, unburned. The canyon was ahead now, visible in the distance, a place of stone and shadow and refuge. Maya stood at the edge of this new path, all 5 pups gathered around her. They had made it through the worst stretch. But this was far from over. The forest still burned behind them. And she knew, if they were going to survive the night, she had to find a true sanctuary. Fast. The canyon opened before them like the gates to another world, cooler, darker, quieter. The transition from burning forest to this pocket of stone felt almost dreamlike. As Maya led the pups over the final ridge, her paws touched solid ground that hadn't felt flame, and her body trembled, not from fear this time, but from sheer relief. Towering rock walls flanked them on either side, ancient and unmoving. The sun, dimmed by smoke overhead, cast long shadows into the canyon's mouth. The temperature dropped by several degrees. For the first time in hours, Maya's lungs tasted air that wasn't thick with ash. The puppies collapsed the moment they stepped into the canyon, their little bodies giving out with soft thuds against the cool earth. Their flanks rose and fell rapidly, but they were alive. Alive. Maya stood for a moment, panting. Her eyes scanned every crack, every crevice of the canyon walls. She wasn't ready to rest. Not yet. The fire was still behind them, still chasing, still hungry. If a spark found its way into the canyon, they would be trapped. So she moved, slowly but surely, deeper inside. The canyon was narrow but wound like a river through the landscape. Its paths twisted, revealing tiny caves and small pools of water fed by underground springs. She found one such pool nestled in a bend, sheltered from the wind and shaded by a ledge of rock. That would be their haven. For now. She called softly to the pups, nudging them awake one by one. They blinked up at her with weary eyes, and though their legs trembled, they followed. She guided them to the water's edge, where they drank eagerly. Maya dipped her own head down, drinking deeply, the water cutting through the dryness in her throat like balm. Then she lay beside them, circling them with her body like a blanket. Her breathing slowed. Her muscles twitched from overuse. She rested her head on her paws and finally, closed her eyes. Sleep came in waves. Not peace. Just unconsciousness. But in that moment, it was enough. She dreamed strange things, of tall green grasses and clouds that rained milk, of running forever through fields with no fire, no fear. Of the puppies grown, strong and proud, hunting and howling under a starry sky. And in her dreams, there was a sound, a soft hum, not unlike thunder, but different. Steady. Rhythmic. When she opened her eyes again, that sound was still there. It was real. Maya stood slowly, ears flicking forward. It wasn't fire. It was something else. A rumble, deep, mechanical. And then, voices. Human voices. Her body went rigid. She knew humans. Had smelled them before. Heard their strange calls echo through the forest during hunting season. She'd avoided them her entire life. But this was different. The voices were urgent, but not angry. The sound of footsteps echoed through the canyon, quick and deliberate. There was another noise too, a low whirring, accompanied by flashes of red and blue light dancing across the stone. Humans. But not just any humans. Rescue teams. Maya watched from behind the rocky ledge as a group of figures in yellow jackets moved into the canyon. Their faces were covered with masks, and their gloved hands carried strange tools. They swept their flashlights across the canyon walls, calling out. They were looking for life. For survivors. Maya didn't move. She didn't trust them. But something about the way they moved, the way they looked at the fire-blackened path behind them, felt different. Compassionate. Urgent. Not hunters. Not threats. Helpers. And then one of them stopped. His light froze on the pups, now huddled behind Maya. She growled low, not a threat, but a warning. The man lowered himself slowly, hands open, speaking in a soft, steady tone. He didn't reach for her. He didn't run. He just waited. And in that moment, Maya had to decide. The fire still raged behind them. Her body was failing. Her pups were fragile. And these strange creatures, these humans, they had water. Shelter. Vehicles that could outrun flames. Help. Maya looked at her puppies, alive, but barely. And then she looked at the man again. And, for the first time in her life, she stepped toward a human. Not for herself, but for them. Maya's paws were cold against the stone, the sharp edges of the canyon floor biting into her skin. The human, he had stopped, standing there, waiting patiently, his hand outstretched but not advancing. He seemed calm, and his voice, muffled by the mask, was steady and reassuring. Maya's heart hammered in her chest. She could feel her breaths quickening, every instinct urging her to remain distant, to protect her puppies at all costs. But there was something about the way he stood, something about his lack of aggression, that made her pause. He wasn't like the others. He wasn't a predator. He wasn't a threat. The fire, still raging behind them, was too close now. Every minute they lingered here, the risk grew. The ravine was their refuge, but it wasn't a sanctuary from the inferno. Maya knew that. If she stayed hidden, if she didn't make the choice, the flames would find them eventually. The pups stirred behind her, their tiny bodies still weak from the exhausting journey. Luna, the smallest of them, whimpered softly, her small form curling into Maya's side. The others, too tired to move, watched intently, their eyes reflecting the same uncertainty that Maya felt. They relied on her, her strength, her instinct, her decisions. They didn't understand the danger, not in the way she did. But they trusted her. And in this moment, Maya knew she had to trust someone else. The man didn't move any closer. He didn't make a sound, just stood there, silently offering his help. Maya's instincts warred with each other, run, stay, fight, or let go. Every fiber of her being screamed for her to protect her pack, to retreat into the shadows and remain hidden. But the fire was coming. It wouldn't stop. She had to make a choice, or they would be swallowed by it. Maya's eyes locked with his. She had seen humans before, from a distance, watching them during hunting season or when they ventured too close to the edge of her territory. But this was different. This man wasn't a hunter. He wasn't a threat. He was offering something she had never considered before, help, compassion, and maybe even safety. She felt a tremor run through her body. Her muscles ached. Her mind was clouded with fear and exhaustion. She needed a moment, just a moment, to think. But time wasn't on her side. And then, Luna looked up at her, her tiny eyes full of trust. That was enough. With a deep breath, Maya stepped forward. Her paws hit the ground softly as she moved closer to the man, who didn't flinch, didn't reach out. He just watched her, his expression hidden behind the mask, but his posture open and calm. Maya stopped just short of him, standing at the edge of the light from his flashlight. She felt his gaze, kind but distant, like he wasn't just seeing a dog, but a soul in need. For a long moment, Maya stood there, unsure. She could feel the weight of her decision, the lives of her puppies hanging on the next move. But the fire's roar was growing louder, and she had no choice. The world was closing in on her. With a soft exhale, Maya took the final step. The man's hand came down gently, fingers brushing her fur. It was warm, reassuring, and she didn't pull away. For the first time in what felt like forever, Maya relaxed slightly. Her muscles unclenched, and she let herself feel the smallest glimmer of hope. Then, as if sensing that their moment of trust had arrived, the pups began to stir. One by one, they pushed themselves up and moved toward the man. Maya's heart swelled as each of them approached, their legs wobbly but determined. The man nodded, a small smile tugging at his lips, though it was hard to tell under the mask. He knelt down slowly, carefully, to meet them at their level. His hand moved to one of the puppies, gently lifting it into his arms. Then another, and another, until all 5 of the pups were being held, cradled, and comforted by the human who had extended his kindness. Maya stood back for a moment, watching, a soft growl of protection still rumbling in her chest. But the fire was too close now, the heat beginning to reach the canyon's edge. She could feel the shift in the air, the oppressive weight of the smoke and the growing heat from behind. There was no more time for hesitation. With one final look, Maya stepped forward again, this time sitting close to the man. She nestled her head into his leg, silently accepting what she had never believed possible, help from a stranger, and safety from the danger she had fought so fiercely to escape. The man looked down at her, his eyes softening beneath the mask. Without a word, he turned, walking toward the distant vehicle with the puppies in tow. Maya followed closely, her body weary but her heart lightening with each step. For the first time in hours, she felt like there was a way out, a way to survive. And though the fire still roared behind them, she had taken that first step into the unknown, into trust. The hum of the engine was a strange comfort as the rescue vehicle rumbled through the rocky terrain, its tires crunching on the dry earth. Maya sat beside the man, her body tense but relieved, her eyes locked on the road ahead. The puppies, exhausted from the journey, had fallen into a peaceful sleep in the man's lap. Their tiny bodies rose and fell with each breath, their faces serene, untouched by the chaos that had consumed their lives just hours before. Maya's gaze drifted to the landscape surrounding them. The canyon had given way to a broader, more open expanse, and in the distance, she could see the rising smoke, a constant reminder of the devastation that was still unfolding. The fire was relentless, but it was behind them now, miles away. They were headed toward the safety of a shelter, a place that promised warmth and care. But Maya knew better than to let her guard down completely. The fire had been unpredictable, and though it seemed far away, there was no telling how fast it could move, how quickly it could turn the land into a furnace. She wasn't foolish enough to believe they were out of danger just yet. The man seemed to sense her unease, glancing down at her with a reassuring smile. His voice, muffled by the mask, broke the silence. "We're almost there, girl. Just hang in a little longer." Maya's ears perked up at the sound of his voice. She wasn't used to this kind of gentleness, this kind of calm. In the forest, it had always been about survival, fighting for food, running from predators, finding shelter. Trust was something earned over time, not something you gave freely. But here, with this man, she felt it, this quiet promise of safety, of a future without fear. She looked down at the puppies again, their soft breathing a constant reminder of why she had fought so hard. Luna, the smallest, snuggled against the man's leg, her little body curled into a tiny ball. Maya reached out and nuzzled her, careful not to disturb the fragile peace that had settled over them. Luna stirred in her sleep, her tiny tail twitching as if in response to Maya's touch. It had been a long time since Maya had allowed herself to feel vulnerable, to trust in anything or anyone. The wild was a place of strength, of independence, where no one relied on anyone else. But now, with the fire still raging behind them, Maya felt the weight of something new, something that was both a burden and a relief, dependence. The road seemed to stretch on forever, the landscape blurring as they passed through fields of burnt grass and charred trees. The man's voice broke the silence again, softer this time. "You did good, girl. You kept them safe." Maya's tail gave a slight twitch at the words. She hadn't thought of it that way. In the chaos of running, of protecting, she hadn't stopped to consider how far she had come, how much she had sacrificed. All she had cared about was keeping her puppies alive. But now, as she sat there beside the man, as the fire grew smaller in the distance, she realized that she had done more than survive. She had led her pack to safety, against all odds. And now, they were on their way to a place that promised shelter, where they could rest and heal. But there was still the lingering question, the uncertainty of the future. What would happen when they reached the shelter? Would they be safe? Would they be accepted? And what about the other animals? The wild didn't stop just because humans showed up. Maya's instincts told her to stay alert, to stay ready for whatever came next. The man seemed to sense her restlessness, his hand gently resting on her head. She didn't flinch this time. Instead, she leaned into his touch, the warmth of his hand a strange comfort. He didn't know her story. He didn't know the wild places she had roamed or the dangers she had faced. But somehow, in that moment, he understood. The vehicle crested a hill, and Maya saw it, an open field, dotted with other rescue vehicles, their lights flashing in the distance. People were moving about, setting up tents and barriers, preparing to help the animals and humans who had survived the fire. The sight was overwhelming. There was hope here, a glimpse of the safety they had been fighting for, The man slowed the vehicle as they neared the camp, his voice calm and steady. "We're here, girl. You're safe now." Maya's heart slowed as they stopped, the engine cutting off. The world was still, the smoke still hanging in the air, but the immediate danger was behind them. The puppies began to stir, waking from their nap as the man gently lifted them one by one from his lap. They looked up at him, blinking in confusion, their small bodies stretching as they adjusted to the new surroundings. Maya stayed close to the man as they stepped out of the vehicle, her eyes scanning the camp. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. The fire had taken so much from them, homes, food, safety, but here, at least, there was something to rebuild, something to hope for. She looked back at the road they had traveled, the fire now a faint memory in the distance. For the first time, Maya allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, there was a future beyond the smoke, beyond the fear. And with that, Maya took the first steps into this new world, one step at a time. The air was cooler here. The oppressive heat from the fire that had chased them across the land was no longer there, replaced by the soft breeze that carried the scent of grass and earth. Maya stood at the edge of the rescue camp, her eyes scanning the horizon, still unsure, still alert. Her muscles were sore, her body fatigued, but the sight before her was something she had only dared to dream of in her most hopeful moments, a chance at a fresh start. Her puppies, now fully awake, were moving around her with a curiosity that had once been reserved for the unknown dangers of the wild. Luna, the smallest of them all, wagged her tail excitedly, her little paws tapping the ground as she took in the new world around her. The others were more cautious, still learning to trust this new environment, but Maya could see it in their eyes. They were starting to understand this was a place where they could be safe, where they could grow without fear. Maya's eyes softened as she watched them. For the first time in what felt like forever, she could breathe without the weight of constant danger hanging over her. The fire was behind them, and they had survived. But survival was only part of the story. She had to believe that there was more to their journey than just making it through the next day. She had to believe in a future where they could live, not just exist. The man who had saved them stood nearby, speaking with a group of other rescue workers. His movements were calm, efficient, and there was a quiet strength in the way he interacted with them. Maya noticed how he was treated with respect, how the others listened to him, following his lead. There was something about him that set him apart, something that made Maya trust him, even without knowing his story. Luna bounced up to him, her tiny tail wagging furiously. The man looked down at her, smiling behind his mask, and gently reached out to pet her. The sight made Maya's heart swell. He wasn't just a rescuer, he was someone who cared, someone who had given them a chance when all seemed lost. The camp itself was a flurry of activity. Volunteers moved from one station to the next, feeding animals, checking for injuries, and offering comfort to those who had endured the same horrors Maya and her pack had faced. She could hear the sounds of other dogs, their barks and whines mixing with the hum of conversation. It was a strange mix of chaos and order, of people working tirelessly to make a difference. But for Maya, the most important thing was the safety of her puppies. She knew that as long as they were together, they could face anything. She would protect them, just as she always had. But here, at the camp, there was something new, a sense of community, of being part of something larger than herself. The man approached Maya, his steps steady, his expression softening as he reached her side. "You've got your family with you," he said, his voice carrying the same calm reassurance that had gotten them this far. "And that's what matters most." Maya met his gaze, her eyes filled with a mix of gratitude and uncertainty. She couldn't understand his world, the world of humans and their ways, but in that moment, she understood something much deeper. It wasn't just about surviving, it was about rebuilding, about finding a place where they could heal. The road ahead would be long, and there would be challenges, but for the first time, Maya felt a glimmer of hope. One of the volunteers approached, a young woman with kind eyes, offering a bowl of food for Maya. She hesitated at first, unsure of this new offering, but hunger won over. She carefully sniffed the food before taking a tentative bite. It wasn't the wild food she was used to, but it was nourishing, and it made her feel a bit stronger. Maya sat down on the soft grass, the puppies crowding around her as they too began to eat. Luna, always the first to dive in, was already gobbling up her share, her tiny form wriggling with excitement. The others followed suit, their tiny faces looking up at Maya with trust in their eyes. She watched them for a moment, her heart swelling with pride. They had made it. Against all odds, they had made it through the worst. The man stepped back, giving Maya and her pack the space they needed. But as he walked away, Maya felt a sense of finality in his actions. He had done what he set out to do. He had saved them. And in that, he had given them something far more valuable than safety. He had given them the chance to begin again. Maya's ears perked up as a soft breeze blew through the camp. It carried with it the scent of wildflowers, a reminder of the land they had once known, and the land that now felt distant and foreign. But Maya wasn't afraid anymore. She wasn't alone anymore. She turned her gaze back to the man, watching him as he spoke to the volunteers. His back was to her now, but she knew he wasn't leaving, not yet. And that was enough for her. For the first time, she could see a future. She could see herself and her puppies in a world where they could run without fear, where they could play without worry. It wouldn't be easy, but it would be theirs. The fire had burned away so much, but it had also forged something new in its wake, a chance for a new life. And for Maya, that was more than enough. The days that followed felt like a blur. It was a strange kind of peace that Maya had never experienced before. The camp had become a haven, a temporary sanctuary where the fire's rage couldn't reach them. Maya could still feel the heat of the flames on her fur, the acrid smell of smoke lingering in the back of her mind, but it was fading. Slowly, the tension in her body loosened. She was learning to relax, to trust again. Each day, Maya watched as the camp continued to operate, with people working tirelessly to care for animals, treat the injured, and rebuild what had been lost. Volunteers came and went, but the compassion they showed remained constant. It was like a soft hum in the background, a reminder that even in the darkest moments, there was kindness, there was hope. The puppies were thriving in this new environment. Luna, ever the curious one, had made friends with the other dogs at the camp. Her energy was infectious, and she had quickly become the little spark that brightened everyone's day. Maya couldn't help but smile as she watched her youngest play with a group of puppies, their tails wagging furiously as they tumbled over each other in a joyful mess. The other puppies, while more reserved, were slowly starting to open up. Maya could see the transformation in them. No longer were they the frightened, trembling creatures they had been when they first arrived. Now, they were more confident, more at ease with their surroundings. And Maya, watching over them, felt a deep sense of relief. She often caught herself looking up at the man who had saved them. He was a quiet presence at the camp, always working, always helping, but never demanding attention. His steady movements and calm demeanor had become a source of comfort for Maya. There was something about him that made her feel safe, even though he was a stranger. He never forced his attention on her, never expected anything in return, but Maya knew that his actions spoke louder than words. One morning, as the sun rose higher in the sky, the man approached Maya, holding a small bag of food. He crouched down beside her, his eyes warm but serious. "How are they doing?" he asked softly, gesturing to the puppies, who were now scattered around the camp, playing with other dogs. Maya's tail gave a slow wag. The puppies were doing better each day, and she knew it was time for them to start adjusting to this new life, to begin moving forward. But Maya wasn't sure how to feel about that. She had been their protector, their guide through the fire and beyond. She had carried the weight of their survival on her shoulders, and now, in this new world, she wasn't sure what her role was anymore. The man seemed to sense her hesitation. He placed a gentle hand on her head, a touch that was both reassuring and understanding. "You've done all you can for them," he said, his voice low. "Now, they need to learn to stand on their own." Maya's ears flicked at the words. It was true, her puppies were growing, learning to navigate this new world. They would no longer need to rely on her for every little thing. But the thought of letting them go, of allowing them to live their own lives, felt foreign to her. She had always been the one in control, the one leading the way. Could she really let go? She glanced at Luna, who was happily chasing a butterfly across the field, her tiny paws kicking up dust as she ran. Maya felt a tug at her heart. Luna would be fine. She had the strength, the spirit. The other puppies, too, they would be okay. The man's hand remained on Maya's head, his fingers lightly stroking her fur. "You've taught them well," he added. "Now it's their turn to learn from a world." Maya's body relaxed under his touch. Maybe it was time. Maybe this was the beginning of something new, not just for her puppies, but for her, too. She had spent so long in survival mode, fighting to protect, to hold on. But now, perhaps it was time to heal. To be part of something greater, something more peaceful. As the days passed, Maya spent more time observing the camp. The volunteers had set up a routine, and the animals were slowly being paired with families or moved to permanent shelters. Some of the dogs who had arrived in a state of panic were now happily walking alongside their new owners, tails wagging, faces alight with joy. Maya watched them, her heart swelling with hope. This, she realized, was what healing looked like. It wasn't just about surviving, it was about finding your place in a world that had been torn apart and rebuilding it, piece by piece. One afternoon, the man came to Maya again, this time with a collar in his hand. It was simple, black leather with a small tag that read, "Maya." He crouched down and gently fastened it around her neck. "You're part of us now," he said softly. "You've earned your place here." Maya's breath caught in her chest as she felt the cool leather against her fur. It wasn't just a collar, it was a symbol. A symbol that she belonged. She had fought for survival, for her puppies, for a future. And now, that future was starting to take shape. Maya stood tall, her heart filled with pride. The fire had tried to take everything from her, but it had only made her stronger. Now, she was ready for whatever came next. The puppies, now full of energy and joy, ran toward her, their tiny bodies bouncing as they yelped with excitement. Maya looked down at them, her heart swelling. They had made it. And so had she. As the sun set over the camp, casting a warm glow over the field, Maya took a deep breath. She was home. The journey was far from over, but this was a new beginning. A beginning that she could face with courage, hope, and the love of her puppies. The days in the camp began to blend together, each one filled with new beginnings and small victories. Maya felt a growing sense of peace that was hard to put into words. The world she had known, one of constant survival, where every shadow could be a threat, felt distant now. Here, in this place of safety and new beginnings, Maya could begin to imagine a future, a life beyond the ashes of the forest that had once been her home. Her puppies were flourishing. Luna had become a little social butterfly, running from one volunteer to another, always seeking attention, always ready to make a new friend. The other puppies, more reserved at first, were finding their footing too. They were learning that there was more to life than just surviving the next moment. They were learning to trust, to enjoy the world around them. Maya often watched them, her heart swelling with pride and love. They had been through so much together, and yet they were all stronger for it. The fire had taken everything from them, home, comfort, security, but it had also given them something else, resilience. Maya knew that as long as they stuck together, they could face anything. The man who had saved them was still a constant presence in the camp. He had become something of a guardian figure, not just for Maya and her puppies, but for everyone in the camp. His calm, steady nature had a way of soothing even the most frantic of souls. Maya watched him as he moved through the camp, checking on the animals, speaking to the volunteers, always doing what needed to be done without a word of complaint. But there was something different about him now, something Maya could sense. He wasn't just the rescuer anymore, he had become part of this world, part of the new community that was being built. There was a quiet strength in him, the kind that comes not from physical prowess but from a deep well of understanding and compassion. Maya had never known humans to be so selfless, so willing to give without expecting anything in return. And in that, she had found something she hadn't expected, trust. As the weeks went on, the camp slowly began to transition from a place of refuge to a place of recovery. Maya had grown accustomed to the soft sounds of life around her, the volunteers speaking softly as they worked, the dogs playing with each other, the distant hum of the camp's activity. It was all so different from the chaos of the fire, the panic, and the fear. Here, there was a sense of calm, of healing. Maya's role in the camp had shifted as well. She wasn't just a survivor anymore, she was part of the healing process. She had become a symbol of resilience, of strength in the face of unimaginable loss. Volunteers and other animals looked to her, not as a victim of the fire, but as a testament to the power of survival, to the bond she shared with her puppies. One afternoon, as the sun hung low in the sky, the man approached Maya once more. He stood before her, his eyes soft but serious, as if contemplating something important. "You've done something remarkable, Maya," he said, his voice full of admiration. "You've brought your puppies through the worst of it, and you've helped them find a new beginning. Now, it's time for them to take the next step." Maya's ears perked up at his words. The idea of her puppies moving on, of them finding their own path, was something she had been avoiding. It was hard to imagine life without them at her side. But she knew it was inevitable. They had to learn how to live on their own, just as she had learned to navigate this new world. "They're ready," the man continued, his gaze never leaving Maya. "And you're ready, too." Maya looked down at her puppies, who were now playing at the edge of the camp. They had grown so much, so quickly. Luna, the adventurous one, was darting between the trees, her little body a blur of energy. The others were more subdued, content to sit in the grass and watch the world pass by. Maya couldn't help but feel a pain of sadness. She had been their protector, their leader. But now, it was time for them to stand on their own 2 feet, or paws, in their case. Maya turned her gaze back to the man, her heart heavy. "I've done all I can for them," she said quietly, the weight of the words settling in her chest. He nodded, his eyes kind. "You've given them the greatest gift a mother can give. The chance to live, to thrive. Now it's time for them to find their own way." Maya stood still for a long moment, watching her puppies. She wasn't sure if she was ready to let go, but she knew she had to. They were strong. They were resilient. And they would make it. Just as she had. The man placed a hand gently on her back. "You've earned your place here, Maya. You've earned the right to rest, to find peace. Your journey doesn't end here. This is just the beginning." Maya's tail gave a slow wag, the movement small but significant. She had been through the fire, literally and figuratively. And now, for the first time in what felt like forever, she could see a future where she wasn't constantly on edge, where she could take her place among the others, no longer defined by what she had lost, but by what she had gained. With a final glance at her puppies, Maya made her way toward the camp's edge. She could hear the laughter of children, the soft barks of other dogs, the hum of the evening breeze. This was her world now. And as she walked, she felt a sense of peace settle over her. The future, though uncertain, was something she was finally ready to face. The days after Maya's decision to let go of her puppies were some of the hardest, but also the most liberating. The camp continued to buzz with activity, the hum of recovery slowly turning into the steady rhythm of rebuilding. Maya found herself in a place she had never imagined, a place where peace existed, where she didn't have to fight for survival every moment. The fire, the destruction, the fear, it all felt so far away now, like a nightmare that she was slowly waking up from. She spent more time in the camp now, not as a survivor, but as a part of it. Maya's role had evolved. She had become a companion to the other animals, a silent guardian for the ones who had suffered in the same way she had. There were so many animals that needed comfort, and Maya, with her calm demeanor, was more than willing to give it. She would walk the camp, her eyes always soft but vigilant, watching the other dogs, listening to the volunteers, offering her silent presence as a reminder that survival was possible, even after the worst of tragedies. The other dogs had grown attached to her, especially those who were still learning how to trust. Maya would often find herself sitting with a shy dog, watching as they slowly came out of their shell. She had learned, through her own painful journey, that healing didn't come quickly. It took time, patience, and most of all, trust. She had learned to trust again, something she never thought she'd do after the fire had torn apart everything she knew. But now, she could feel it again. It was small at first, but it was there, hope. Hope for a future, for herself and for the others. One day, Maya found herself by the edge of a camp, looking out at the forest in the distance. The trees that had once been her home, the trees she had fought to protect, were now nothing more than charred remnants of what they had been. It was hard to look at them, the memory of the fire still burned in her mind, the terror of those first few moments, the frantic search for her puppies. But even in the face of the devastation, there was something new growing in her heart. Resilience. She had learned it from the forest itself. A soft voice broke her thoughts. It was the man again. He had come to stand beside her, his gaze following hers. "You've come a long way, Maya," he said quietly, his voice full of admiration. "I see it in your eyes. You've made it through something most will never understand. You're not just a survivor anymore. You're a symbol of strength, of what it means to keep going, no matter the odds." Maya's ears perked up at his words. She had never thought of herself as a symbol, not really. She had just been doing what she had to do, fighting for her puppies, protecting them, making sure they survived. But now, as she stood there, looking at the man who had stood beside her through it all, she began to understand. She had made it through not just for herself, but for everyone else who had been through the same ordeal. The man gave her a soft smile, the kind that spoke volumes. He was proud of her, and in that moment, Maya felt something she hadn't felt in a long time, worth. It was the same worth that she had seen in her puppies, in the way they had grown and thrived in the safety of the camp. She wasn't just a mother anymore. She was a protector, a teacher, a guide. And perhaps, most importantly, she was someone who had learned to move forward. "The future isn't always certain," the man continued, "but you've shown that even in the darkest of times, there's always a way to find light." Maya turned her head, her eyes meeting his. The forest in the distance no longer seemed as dark, no longer seemed as foreboding. It was a place of memories now, a place of lessons learned. The future, as uncertain as it was, didn't seem as intimidating as it once had. Maya had learned that strength wasn't just about surviving the worst of things, it was about moving forward, about making the choice to live after everything had been taken from you. The man placed a hand on her shoulder, a gentle touch that made her feel seen, understood. "You've given your puppies everything they need. Now, it's time for you to find your place in this world, too." Maya's tail wagged slowly, the movement a sign of quiet acceptance. She had been waiting for this moment, not knowing what it would look like, not knowing how it would feel. But here it was. The beginning of something new. She didn't know what the future held, but she knew that she was ready for it. As the man walked away, leaving her to her thoughts, Maya took a deep breath, the air sweet and cool in her lungs. She could feel the weight of the past lifting, slowly but surely, leaving space for something new. The fire had taken so much from her, but it had given her something back too. It had taught her how to survive, how to protect, how to heal. And most importantly, it had taught her how to move forward. Maya turned her gaze back to the camp, to the new families who were taking in animals, to the puppies who were growing up strong and confident. She could see the future unfolding before her, not just for her puppies, but for herself as well. She didn't have to be defined by what she had lost. She was ready to embrace the possibilities that lay ahead. It had been weeks since Maya had let go of her puppies, and as time passed, a new sense of calm had settled over her. The camp, once a place of survival, had become a sanctuary. But now, with the camp's mission of recovery nearing completion, something else was beginning to stir within Maya. She had spent so long focusing on the survival of her puppies, on protecting them from the dangers of the world, that she hadn't truly thought about what came next for herself. The camp was bustling with activity as the volunteers began to help animals find permanent homes. It wasn't just the dogs anymore, there were cats, rabbits, even a few injured birds that had all found their way to safety. Maya watched as new families were formed, as people took in animals who had lost everything, promising them a new life. It was beautiful to see, but it also reminded her that she, too, needed to find her own place in this new world. One day, as Maya was resting in the shade of a large tree near the center of the camp, she noticed the man approaching her again. He had a different look in his eyes today, one that seemed filled with purpose. He stopped before her, his gaze soft but serious. "Maya," he said, his voice warm, "I think it's time we talked about your future." Maya lifted her head, her tail giving a slow wag. She had thought about it often, the idea of leaving the camp, of finding her own home. But the thought was both thrilling and terrifying. She had never lived in a house, never known the comfort of a bed, or the simple joy of a home that wasn't constantly shifting and changing. But now, with everything she had been through, she could feel herself yearning for something more, something stable, something permanent. The man sat down next to her, his expression kind but thoughtful. "I've been working with some of the families who have come here to adopt. There's a family nearby, a couple with 2 young children. They've been looking for a dog like you, Maya. A dog who's strong, loving, and resilient." Maya's ears perked up at the mention of the family. She had seen them around the camp, 2 children who always seemed to have a smile on their faces, their laughter infectious. The parents were kind, gentle, and seemed to have a calm aura about them. Maya had noticed them watching her from a distance, but she hadn't thought much of it. Now, as the man spoke, she could see it in his eyes. He wasn't just talking about any family. He was talking about a family that could offer her exactly what she needed, a home. "They're good people, Maya," he continued, his voice filled with sincerity. "They want to offer you a place in their lives. A place where you'll be safe, loved, and cared for. A home." The idea of a home, her own home, was a foreign concept. Maya had never truly understood the word until now. It was more than just a physical space. It was about belonging. It was about finding somewhere where you could rest, where you could be who you were meant to be, without the constant worry of survival. For the first time, Maya felt a rush of hope. She had seen families come and go, but now she understood what they were really offering. A future. Stability. A chance to live a life that was not defined by loss but by love and companionship. The man reached out, his hand gently resting on her shoulder. "I know you've been through a lot, and this decision isn't easy. But I think you'll find happiness with this family. They'll give you the love and care you deserve, Maya. You've earned it." Maya's tail gave a slow, thoughtful wag. She was scared. Leaving the camp, leaving everything she had known for so long, was a big step. But as she thought about it, she realized that she wasn't just leaving behind a life of survival. She was moving toward a life of possibility. The man stood up and gestured toward the family. They were standing nearby, the children running ahead with joy, their eyes sparkling with excitement. The parents watched them with tender smiles, their love for each other and their future dog evident in the way they looked at Maya. Maya slowly rose to her feet, her legs a little stiff from the long days of rest. The man stepped back, giving her space to approach the family. She hesitated for a moment, her heart racing with uncertainty. But as she took her first steps toward them, she realized that this was the moment she had been waiting for. The moment when her journey of survival would come to an end, and her journey toward love and security would begin. As she reached the family, the children's faces lit up. One of the girls knelt down, holding her hands out to Maya. "Hi, girl," she said, her voice soft and full of warmth. "We've been waiting for you." Maya approached cautiously at first, her eyes soft and curious. She sniffed the girl's outstretched hand, then leaned in closer, her tail wagging gently. The girl's laughter bubbled up as she reached out to pet Maya, her touch light and gentle. The man stood behind Maya, watching the exchange with a smile on his face. "She's a special one," he said to the parents. "She's been through a lot, but she's strong. She'll be a wonderful addition to your family." Maya's heart fluttered as she looked up at the family. The man was right. This was the moment. The future she had once feared, the unknown that loomed ahead, was now a source of excitement. She was ready to start a new chapter, to find her a place in the world, to finally have a home to call her own. The first days in her new home were a blur of new experiences, strange smells, and unfamiliar sounds. Maya had never imagined that she would find herself in a place like this, an actual home, warm and inviting, with soft rugs on the floor and a bed that wasn't made of dirt or hard ground. She could still feel the memory of the camp, the sound of the animals, the quiet hum of daily survival, but it was all fading away now, replaced by something infinitely more comforting, the feeling of true safety. Her new family, the couple and their 2 children, were kind and gentle. They spoke to her in soft voices, their movements careful and slow, as if they understood how fragile she was, how much she had been through. Maya had never known people like this, people who didn't expect anything from her, except for her presence. They didn't demand her to perform, to prove herself. They simply wanted to love her. At first, Maya spent most of her time in the backyard, lying under the shade of a large tree, watching the children play. They would come to visit her regularly, offering treats and toys, gently coaxing her to join in their games. It was strange, this idea of playing, of being a dog in the way that dogs were meant to be. She had spent so long focusing on survival, on protecting her puppies, that she had forgotten how to be just a dog, how to enjoy the simple things in life, like chasing a ball or running through the grass with a child's laughter ringing in her ears. It wasn't easy at first. Maya had her moments of doubt, moments when she wondered if she truly belonged here. She had seen too much, endured too much, to simply forget everything. The fire, the loss, the fight to survive, they had all become a part of her. But with every passing day, she felt the weight of her past slowly lift. The love of her new family, their constant care and attention, began to fill the empty spaces that had once been filled with fear and uncertainty. One evening, after the children had gone to bed, Maya sat on the porch with the man and his wife. They were watching the stars, their eyes turned toward the night sky, the sounds of crickets filling the air. Maya sat beside them, her body relaxed, her head resting gently on the woman's lap. The man broke the silence, his voice soft but full of affection. "You've come a long way, Maya," he said, his hand gently resting on her back. "You're not the same dog you were when we first met you. You've been through so much, but you've made it. You've found your way to this family. You've found your way home." Maya's tail gave a slow, contented wag as the woman stroked her fur. She didn't need to say anything. The words, the understanding, were already there. She had found her place, her purpose, and it was here with them, in this home, in this family that had given her the chance to heal, to grow, and to love again. The couple continued to speak softly to each other, their words barely a murmur, but Maya didn't mind. She closed her eyes, listening to the rhythmic sound of their voices, the comforting weight of their hands on her body. For the first time in what felt like forever, she was truly at peace. The past didn't haunt her here. She had been given a second chance, and she was taking it, one day at a time. The world had changed for Maya, in ways she couldn't have imagined before. The fire that had once seemed like the end had turned out to be just the beginning of a new chapter. She had lost so much, but she had also gained so much more. She had found a family that loved her, a home that embraced her, and the promise of a future filled with happiness and security. In the quiet of the evening, as the stars twinkled above and the cool breeze rustled through the trees, Maya knew that she was where she was meant to be. The world was vast and uncertain, but she had found her place in it. She had found her home. The man's voice broke through her thoughts again, soft but firm. "Maya, I want you to know something. You're not just a survivor. You're a part of this family. You belong here." Maya lifted her head, meeting his gaze with eyes full of gratitude. She didn't need to speak to tell him what she was feeling. Her heart, her whole being, radiated with the love and appreciation she had for them, for giving her a chance, for showing her that life didn't have to be a constant battle. That love, and safety, and home were possible, even after the worst of times. Her tail wagged once more, a sign of contentment, a sign that she had found peace. It wasn't the life she had expected, but it was the life she had fought for, the life she had earned. And in that moment, under the starry sky, Maya knew that she was finally home. Months had passed since Maya had found her new home, and with each day, The memories of the burning forest, the smoke, the chaos, and the fear seemed to fade a little more. What had once been an overwhelming nightmare was now a distant memory, replaced by the warmth of her new life. The once terrifying world outside the camp, a world full of uncertainty, had become a place where Maya felt she truly belonged. She had grown stronger, both in body and spirit. Her coat was now sleek and shiny, and the sadness that had once clouded her eyes was replaced by a spark of joy. She had found her place in this family, and each day, as the children played with her, as she followed the man and woman through the woods for walks, as they shared quiet evenings on the porch, Maya understood that she had not only survived but thrived. The children had become her world. They loved her unconditionally, their laughter filling the house as they played games, hid toys for her to find, and even taught her tricks. Maya had never been trained to do tricks before, but there was something magical about the bond between her and the children. They would sit together in the living room, and Maya would watch intently as the girl held up a treat, guiding Maya to sit, stay, and even roll over. Each time she succeeded, the children's voices would burst with excitement, their prey showering her with love. The family had also introduced her to the joy of routine. In the mornings, after the children left for school, Maya would follow the man on his daily jog through the woods, the two of them moving in perfect harmony. At first, it had been difficult for Maya to adjust to such a regular schedule, but she soon began to look forward to these morning jogs. It was a time when it was just her and him, a time when the world felt quiet and peaceful, and she could simply enjoy the moment. But the biggest change had come when the man started talking about adopting another dog. Maya had been the first one in the family's heart, but there was still room for another, a dog who needed a second chance just as Maya had. The idea of sharing her space with another dog was both exciting and daunting. Would they get along? Would they have to compete for attention? But the more she thought about it, the more she realized that there was enough love to go around. Maya had learned that love, like the world around her, was infinite. It could stretch and grow without ever running out. It was one afternoon, after Maya and the man returned from a jog, that the decision was made. The family had decided to adopt a dog from the shelter, a young pup who had been found wandering alone. Maya was a little nervous when she heard the news. She had been the center of attention for so long that the thought of sharing it with another dog made her heart race. But when she saw the puppy for the first time, small, with soft, trembling fur, her instincts kicked in. She approached the little pup with slow, deliberate steps, her tail wagging tentatively. The puppy looked up at her, eyes wide and uncertain, but as their gazes met, Maya felt something stir within her. This little one needed her, just as she had once needed others. Maya didn't know it yet, but she was about to become a guide, a protector once again, not for her puppies, but for this little soul who was finding its way in the world. As the days passed, Maya and the puppy formed a bond. Maya taught the pup the ropes, where to find food, where to sleep, and, most importantly, how to trust. It was the beginning of a new chapter for both of them. The puppy's curiosity about the world around it was endless, and Maya's patience and experience became its guide. Together, they ran through the fields, played in the yard, and found comfort in each other's presence. Maya had come full circle. She had survived the fire, the loss, the fear, and the uncertainty. Now, she was thriving in a home that was filled with love and warmth, a place where she could relax, enjoy the sunshine, and know, without a doubt, that she was safe. The world had given her a second chance, and she had embraced it fully. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm orange glow across the sky, Maya sat on the porch with the family. The children were running around in the yard, and the puppy, now more confident, was chasing after them. Maya's heart swelled as she watched the scene unfold. The man and woman sat beside her, their hands resting gently on her back, and in that moment, Maya realized that she had found everything she had ever dreamed of. She had found a family. She had found a home. And most importantly, she had found peace. The fire that had once threatened to consume her had been replaced by the fire of love, a fire that burned bright and steady in her heart. Maya was no longer just a survivor. She was a part of something greater, a family, a home, a future filled with endless possibilities. And as the stars began to twinkle in the sky above, Maya knew that she had found her happy ending. A beginning full of hope, love, and the promise of many more days to come.